Hello folks, welcome to DoAnyTech channel. Today I'm going to show you how to use chartJs on React and to build this very simple student track chart application. And also we are going to update this dynamically using React state and using this form here. For example, if we try to update this record to 99 and this one to, for example, 77 and 55, for example, and this one here, for example, to 89. So as you see, this dynamically is updating. And for example, in real life, you would actually connect this to actual API database and then updating this and using dynamic data. But in this scenario, just I'm going to show you how to use this on React, and also how you can integrate this with the form to update it, to update this chart dynamically, and how you can build it basically in React. And if you are new to my channel, don't forget to press subscribe and enable the notification bell to get all new tutorials and video, and press thumb up, leave your comment down in the comment section, try to share the tutorial with your friend. Let's go and start to build this chart in React.js. So let me just close this tab here, and what we are going to use today, I'm going to use just HTML table with input to build the form. We can update the chart, and also we are going to use this React package to create React app, basically to generate a React app. And also we are going to use this React chart library here to use this example here, which is a vertical bar chart, and we are going to follow also the documentation for this library. If we come to this here, this terminal, I'm going to just stop the current app the demo, and I'm going to go outside this directory and creating a new React app. So the new one, I'm going to call it React-chart, and then hit enter, and this will take some second to create this one, and we'll be back as soon as this finish. So this finished to creating a React app. We can just copy this line to take us inside the directory, and now we can open this in VS Code. Let me open this in large screen, and now we have this our code here. And let me just run this code, npm start. And this is just React app. Now is loading React app. So if we need to add a React chart.js, we need to install it first. And to do that, if you are using npm, you need to use this script, and if you are using yarn, you can use this one. So I'm using npm, so I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to just to open a new tab here, just navigate to the same directory, React chart, and I'm going to just to install this package, or two packages here, react-chart.js and react.js. This will take some second, and that is finished now. And if come back again to this terminal and go back to the browser and go to this documentation for React virtual bar chart, and I'm going to use this example and just modify this to meet our purpose or our tutorial here. And inside this app, before I actually do anything, I'm going to remove all this CSS from here, from this app, and yes, I'm going to add margin or padding left and padding right 150 pixels, just to bring the chart to middle of the screen. And now if I go to this app here, I'm going to remove everything from inside and just remove also this logo, and just display here chart. And if we go back to the browser again and see our app, how it look like now, as you see that just now displaying chart. If we go back to this code, what I'm going to do next, I'm going to create a component, call it custom chart.js, and inside this custom I'm going to paste the code that we just brought from here, from this React chart example, the one this code. And if I go back again here, let me just rename this extension.js, not HJS. And now I'm going to just modify this component to remove this one, leave this top here. And next I'm going to use E6 syntax here instead of this old syntax. And I'm going to bring this data here to inside this function, and I'm going to remove this support, and also I'm going to create an array of data to assign to this one, which will be just called data, and this will be here just a variable const data to separate this data outside, because we are going to use this later and to update it dynamically. And if we just reset this one, now it should be the same data we have it here, and because this same data here, this will conflict with this one, and let's call just this custom data, just to avoid having same names. And you need to update these props here with this new value. And now what is next step? So basically this is a chart app, and they're using this faker package, and we don't use that here. So faker package, which will allow you to populate fake data. For example, it was being used here, and instead of this, I'm going to use for now just static data, will be array of data. For example, 20, 30. So first 4 records for each student, for example, 55, for example, 90. And this same, basically, I'm going to duplicate it for this student here. And if I just save that now and go to the browser, let's see our app and reload. Nothing is appearing because we didn't call this component yet. We need to render this component. Before render that, let's rename this one to custom chart, and we need to call this component inside or import it inside this app component, and it will be custom chart, and just close it and go back to the browser. And now if we reload, now we see that the chart that we just tried to take from this documentation here, same to this one, but the data value, because we changed that data value to our new record. And as you see that the title is called chart bar, we need to change the title and also changing this columns with the student instead of this database. If we go back to our chart component here, let's start with labels first. If we go to the browsers, as you see here, this is the labels at the bottom, and we can change these labels to our materials, for example HTML, CSS, JS, and React. And just remove this 3 record at the end, we don't need them. And now instead of this database one is going to be a name, for example start with the Mo, and second one is going to be John. And let's add third record, which will be Khaled. And also we can change actually this color here, but before changing the color, let's go to the browser and see how this look like. As you see now, we have 4 materials and we have 3 students, and each one of them will be represented with a different color. I'm going to just to change make a color like unique color for each one of these students. Let me just change first one to this Mo to black color, for example John to red color, and this Khaled to green. And if I save that, but before that, let me remove this and come back here. As you see now, the color is being changed, and the record also is same record for each. If I change, for example, this record here to be 60, and this will be 45, and this will be 80 and 80, and for example for Mo here, this make it 30, and this make for the John make it 90, and this one 85, and for example 50. If I save this one and go here again, as you see now, the chart is look different. But instead of changing like this data manually, we need to create a form so we can update it dynamically, as you saw on the demo, and how we can do that one. So the next step, we need to create a form to update this one. And let's just create a new form here. Let's call it, for example, student form.js. And let's create just a quick component here. For now, just let's display this text, and let's import this component inside this app after this chart here. And now let's see that on the browser. As you see, we have this student form. Next step, I'm going to use this HTML table, this table here, and I have already the code for this, and I'm going to bring this part here, and let's go back to our code, and inside this form, instead of this, just open this parenthesis here, I'm going to remove all of this, leave only one row and with the header, and inside this header I'm going to modify this header to our material. First one is going to be the student name, and next one is going to be HTML and then CSS, and let's have two more column here, one for JS and one for ReactJs. Then here for this row we have around 3 different students, and each student should have around 4 columns to represent here the name and HTML record, CSS record, JavaScript record, and React.js records. And how we can do that one, I'm going to just to bring this code and explain it. So basically this row here, instead of single row, I'm going to take this out and I'm going to add this one. So I will map over user data or student data. So let me just call it user data for now. I'm going to pass this as a props down to this component. So this user data, which will be this data here, I'm going to showing you what data I mean. This data here, I'm going to call it user data, but for now, because it's inside a chart component, we cannot access it. Let me pass it down here to this component as user data, or for now just call it user data, and this user data will be passed instead of this data here. And I'm going to take this data to app component so I can pass it down to this component. If I come to app component here, and for now this data, because we are going to update and to make it dynamic, so we need to create a state, and this state will have a user data set user data, and then use state, and the user state user default value will be this data. Now we can pass this user data down to chart component as a props, and we should, if we go back and reload the browser, still the app work fine. We have an error here, say handle user change is not defined, so this is inside the form. If we go back to this form, for now let me just pass this function as a props to this form here, and if I come back to this app, let me create this function for now, just empty function, to just fix this error. And I need to pass this as a props also to the form, and the form also will expect this user data as a props. So now I can share the data across with the chart form component and also with the student form component. If I go to the browser, reload, let me open here the browser and see the error. He'll try to read this data on the student form and not exist. If I go back to this form, is expecting to use it's called users data instead of user. Let me just to rename this this state here to be users instead of users data, and also this set users. And if I go back to this chart, let me change this props to be users data. And now if I go to the browser, I should see the form is working. So now that is working, and we have the form is populated. But before the form populate, let me explain how this being work here. So basically we have the header, and then we have 3 column, and this 3 column basically dynamic columns, because it will be dependent on the data we have. Here is coming, we have this, each one of these will 3 rows, sorry, not 3 column. Each student will represent a row, and then inside the form we map over this student data, and first will display first column will have the student name by accessing user.label, and the next 3 column basically will be displayed, or the 4 columns will be displayed depending on the student data or user data, which we have here. If we go back, see this data here, depending on this we map over this, because we have 4 indexes here, we'll have 4 columns. If we come back again to the form, we'll use first to display the name and then map over a user data, and for each index or each record try to display this column, and inside this column will display input, HTML input. The type is going to be a number. We don't need this max. The value will be the actual value that inside the array, and then we call on change, and we pass this handle user change function, which will track what we ever type inside that input. We'll pass through this function event, so this event will be fair when we start to type inside the input, and then we'll pass the second param will be the user ID, and the third param is going to be the index for that array record. For example, if I come back to this data, so for this will be the index will be 0, this will be 1, and this 2, and this 3, and we'll use this index later to filter the exact records that we need to update. And if we come back to the app here, we have this function which should do a lot of work. This handle user, I'm going to bring the code for this function and explain it too. So here, just instead of this function is the same function, I'm going to replicate it here. This is the same name, so I'm going to remove this. So this is the same function as I said that we are going to pass 3 param. First param will be the event, and second one the user ID, and third one index. And first we'll check the value that we entered inside the input by accessing the value from the event.target. And we'll check here in this line 29, if the value less than or equal to 100, then try to update the data, otherwise not update the data. So the maximum number that we are going to enter is going to be 100. Then inside here, I'm going to declaring this variable, and then we'll try to update this here, this user data, by mapping over the current user data, and then check if the user data ID equal to the ID that we pass through this handle input or handle user change function, which will be we'll check if we still have this error here. Let me check the error, and we need to change this function to be this one instead and save it. And basically when we type, for example, if we type inside this input, we'll get the index for this input, which will be 1, and for this one will be 2, and this one will be 3, and for the first one will be 0. And depending on this index, we can also try to update the data by accessing the user, this user here .data, for this index, then update it with the value that we just entered. And after updating that, then just we return an object. We spread the actual user data. We overwrite the data for this user by using just user.data, which will be updated in this line. And after updating this, just return it. Otherwise, if this user not equal, user.id is not equal to this ID, then just return the actual user. At the end, we'll have this variable will have an array of the user data. For example, will be array of this data here with the updated value. And after having this updated data, we just update the state by calling this set user data, this function, and passing that down here. If we save it and go back to the browser, let me reload, let me update this one. For an example, if I update this to 100, as you see, this 3 of them now is updating. There's something wrong. Let's go back and check it out. There seems one file is not saved. If we go back to this form and save it, yeah, this form not saved. And if we come back again, reload, and try change this record, 100, still this is now updating all of them together. Let's go back and see what's wrong. If we come back to this app here, and we don't have user ID, if we go back to this form, as you see, we use this user ID. We expect this to be inside this record. Let's go back inside the app here. Let's add user ID for each user. Let's start by 1 and 2 and 3. So ID will make a user unique, and we can update each one of them independently. If we reload, and now let's update again, 100. As you see, now we update only one user, and for example 66, for example 88, and as you see, and same we can update for the rest, and for all the student, and this dynamically is being updated. So for all record basically. And we can update for all. And as you see, so that is basically how we can create React chart, and how we can use that in React.js, and how we can update this dynamically using this form. And I hope that was simple and easy to understand. And thank you for watching. And don't forget again to subscribe, enable notification bell, and press thumb up and leave your comment down in the comment section. Share the tutorial with your friend. And thank you for watching, and see you in very next tutorial.